DC Comics have been releasing preview pages for Alan Scott, the Green Lantern #1 from Tim Sheridan, for like 3 weeks now. And if this is the stuff that they're actually proud to show you that they think is going to make you want to buy this comic book, I can't imagine just how bad this comic book gets after that. Tim Sheridan, the writer, apparently did not appreciate that, and he took to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and he had an impassioned plea, and I guess he decided to pull the only arrow out of his quiver. I guess it's out of all the comic book writers' quiver. He decided to call the fans queerphobes, trolls, you're all Comicsgate. This has never actually worked, and they've been doing this for a while. There have been so many writers that when people actually have fair criticism of what they're presenting for characters that have existed for upwards of 50, in this case, 80 years, the idea is, no, it's a good story. You're just a homophobe. That's the reason you don't like it. You're just a bigot. That's the reason that you don't like it. If you have criticism for Tim Sheridan or anybody else writing LGBTQ-centric comic books at DC or Marvel these days, that just means you're a terrible person. That means you're a homophobe, queerphobe, you're a troll, you're Comicsgate, and nobody should listen to you because you're the enemy. That's what these writers have come to, and this has not worked out for anybody. What's Max Versaggio doing right now? Not writing very much. What's Sina Grace doing right now? Not writing very much. What's Megan Fitzmartin doing right now? Not writing very much. This has never actually worked out for anybody. Perhaps Tim Sheridan will be the first person to go out there, attack the fans, call them disgusting names, and actually increase the profile and sales of the comic book. Although, I'm just going to say, if you got worldwide publicity for John Kent, the new Superman, that they decided to retcon and change his sexuality, worldwide coverage, and it was still canceled in 18 issues due to low sales, I do not believe the one issue bump that's likely to happen because of all this outrage and controversy that Tim Sheridan himself and DC Comics are courting right now will probably be worth it in the long run. Although, after having read Teen Titans Academy, the entire run of that one, I don't think Tim Sheridan was ever going to be anything other than a blip on the radar as comic books actually moved on to more talented writers. So let's talk about what Tim Sheridan had to say about you and I. I'm here to ask you a favor. The book comes out next Tuesday, October 24th, but already the haters and the queerphobes are out in force doing everything they can to see that this book tanks. They use code and make it sound like they have legitimate problems with a book they haven't even read yet. But the truth is, they just don't like that this is a queer hero in the upper ranks of the DCU. Now, I've already had a video about this, and I was talking to my friend Eric Breed, and as far as I know, he's not a queerphobe, or he's not a hater or anything like that. He's just a lifelong DC Comics fan. And I would say that his concerns were absolutely legitimate. And I don't remember Eric Breen speaking in code. I don't remember him flashing the AOK sign. I certainly don't speak in code. Every word out of my fucking mouth is actually what I mean. The reason this is a bad change, and the reason this didn't work for, let's look at some of the other characters, a Bobby Drake, the reason this didn't work for a Tim Drake, and the reason it certainly doesn't work for an Alan Scott is because there's actually so much history. In fact, with Alan Scott, there's more history with that character than the other two, perhaps combined. There's actually 80 years of history for Alan Scott, not only as a standalone character, but also as a member of the JSA. And yes, going back and retconning the history of DC Comics and Alan Scott and Green Lantern and the JSA, so Tim Sheridan can see himself in the comic book character, I just don't think is worth it. In fact, I think it's an outrage, and it's a spit in the face of all the wonderful creators that have worked on this character for so long. For you to say everything they did, none of it matters. None of it was important. None of it was actually important to the history and defining who Alan Scott and the origins of Green Lantern at DC Comics are, because Tim Sheridan is more important than that. I don't speak in code. I meant every fucking word of that. That doesn't make me a homophobe. It doesn't make me a queerphobe. It doesn't make me any of that stuff. I can say, you know what? I got no problems with gay people. I got gay family. I got gay friends and all that kind of stuff. You know what I still don't want to read in my superhero comic books? A queer coming of age story, a queer romance story. I actually don't want to read any of that stuff. Hey, I tried it once when I went and saw Brokeback Mountain. I said, you know what? I love Westerns. Let's see if the queer romance Western is going to do it for me. I've seen it once. Perfectly fine. No problems with it. Guess what I haven't gone back for? A second viewing. I'd rather watch The Unforgiven. I'd rather watch The Outlaw Josie Wales and all the other Westerns out there that actually made me love Westerns in the first place. Not everybody wants all their genres spliced into each other so they can be overtaken by some stupid love story. Or in this case, being blackmailed by J. Edgar Hoover into changing the fact that Alan Scott never actually wanted to join the JSA, who weren't actually an elite team of superheroes. They were just a propaganda arm of the US government. Yeah, shockingly, DC Comics fans don't really like that. He continued, the only way we can shut these people down is to make this book an undeniable success. The only way to prove to big publishers that there's a huge market for authentic stories about LGBTQ characters, and these stories are for everyone to buy the heck out of books like this. This one's only 6 issues and each one has a few variants. So I'm asking, if you have the means, buy them, buy extras, give to people you think really need it. So the only way to make this book successful is to emotionally blackmail people. If you hate queerphobes, if you hate homophobes, if you hate Comicsgate, you need to support my book. Not because the story is good, not because I've told an amazing Alan Scott story, not because I've really stayed true to the history lore character and all that stuff of DC Comics and JSA or anything like that. But if you don't like the queerphobes, that's the reason to buy this book. Not exactly a ringing endorsement by Tim Sheridan himself of what's actually in the comic book itself. And he says, yes, buy more variant covers. Buy the same comic book over and over and over with different comic book covers because you're not going to enjoy the interiors anyway. The story's not good anyway. Just support the cover. That's the best he can come up with to actually sell the book a week before it comes out. I don't know. What do you think? Does it sound like Tim Sheridan, the people at DC Comics, think that they've actually delivered a winner here? Does it sound like this is anywhere near on the quality of a Jay Garrick, The Flash #1, which came out this week from Jeremy Adams? Is it going to be even close to the quality of Wesley Dodds, The Sandman #1 from Robert Venditti with Riley Rossmo on art, which had terrible art, but a pretty darn good story? It sounds like 2 people got the assignment right, and Tim Sheridan missed the boat so bad, and those sales are going to be so terrible, he actually has to go out there and emotionally blackmail people into actually supporting the comic book. He then stated, I am asking you to join the Corps. If you are about truth and justice, about shining a light in the darkness, if you think comics are and should continue to be for everyone, or if you just want to force these Comicsgate trolls back under the bridge they crawled out from, please support the book. It's hard to get somebody really outraged about Alan Scott unless they really love Alan Scott or the Green Lantern Corps or just DC Comics history and lore. You can keep calling people trolls. You can keep calling them bigots. You can keep calling them homophobes. You can keep calling them queerphobes. That doesn't change the fact that these are the people that have been supporting these books all their lives. These are the people that have been going to their comic book shops every Wednesday for decades upon decades that you're calling out, calling names, and you're telling them they're bad people because they don't like the significant, very significant changes you are implementing on the character and the history, not only of Alan Scott, not only of the JSA, but also the entire DC Comics universe. It's real easy to put out a video on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, put it out on the social medias and get people to like it and share it and repost and say, you go, boy. This is exactly how I feel about this comic book. I'm definitely going to be there on week #1. I've already put it on my pull list. It's really easy to say that out in public. It's a lot harder if you're not a comic book fan, if you don't actually know who Alan Scott is, if you don't even know what the DC Comics universe really is other than maybe what you've seen in movies. It's a lot harder to go out there and go and find that local comic book shop and actually show up there, talk to the owner, talk to the manager, talk to somebody that works there and say, hey, listen, how much is that Alan Scott Green Lantern #1? Oh, it's $5. That seems like a lot of money. I've already supported the book when I actually reposted the tweet. I already supported the book when I hearted it. And I said, you go, Tim Sheridan. That's the kind of fierce attitude I've been looking for in comic books. Even though I never actually read a comic book, maybe $5 isn't worth the investment where I've already got all the accolades and the public acknowledgement that I supported it already. It's a lot harder to change those people's minds to go down and find these places and spend that money than it is to actually sell the comic book to the people that already read comic books, the people that already know who Alan Scott is, the people that are already invested into the Green Lantern Corps, the people that already love the JSA, the people that love Golden Age DC Comics, the people that just love DC Comics, or perhaps just love superhero comic books in general. It would be a whole lot easier if you could actually justify your book and explain to those people who are already bought into the medium, who are already used to spending $6 for $2 worth of entertainment every single week of their lives, and tell them, this is why you should support my book. I know it appears I've done something, but trust me, I would never do that. I respect the characters, the lore, the history. I respect Green Lantern, and I respect Alan Scott, and I respect you and I respect the time that you put into DC Comics and your fandom, and I wouldn't do that to you. You can trust me. Go down to your shop, pick up that comic book, and I'm telling you, your mind will be changed. That will be so much easier to sell that than to actually sell people to go and support something they've never actually supported in their life. It's easy to support an idea. It's a lot harder to go out there and find that shop and put that money down on something you probably don't even think is worth it in the end. And do Comicsgate even talk about this stuff for the most part anymore? Yes, if you go out there and say Comicsgate, Comicsgate, and you talk down on them, they will show up en masse and tell you to go fuck yourselves. But from what I noticed, these guys are just selling comic books and doing crowdfunding stuff and have created their own community. It feels like for the most part, they're just like sticking to themselves and doing their own thing. I don't know why we're blaming Comicsgate because Green Lantern fans and DC fans say this is bullshit. Perhaps they make a good point. This is the last thing I'll talk about. And send a message that the bullying and lies and the hate have to stop. Everyone deserves to see themselves in comics. Everyone needs allies. And if you're an ally, now is the time to step up. We outnumber them. So let's pool our power, vote with our wallets, and beat these assholes. Saying that people are lying about what's been put out there. I made a video, and I'm only speaking about myself, specifically addressing the preview pages that DC Comics and their marketing team put out there. And I'm pretty sure unequivocally, yes, it's quite certain that J. Edgar Hoover is blackmailing Alan Scott to join the JSA because he doesn't want to, and he's a closeted homosexual man. That absolutely is in there. And it's certainly in there that J. Edgar Hoover is implying that he might want to have a little romp with him himself. Now, whether that happens or not, I'm not really sure. I haven't read the comic book, but I didn't say it did. Other people took it a little bit further, but I can completely see how they could come to that conclusion with the pages that DC Comics and their marketing team decided to actually put out there. Perhaps, Tim Sheridan, your problem is with DC Comics and their marketing team who actually went out of their way to court this controversy and make it a big deal. They knew exactly what was going to happen when they decided to include those pages as the ones to sell the comic book on. They decided to sell it on Outrage. Also, you're acting like your customers are Zoomers or something. You are actually not selling this comic book to 12-year-old girls and boys. You are not even selling this comic book to 16-year-old girls and boys for the most part. You're not even selling this comic book really to 23-year-old boys and girls, men and women at that point for this comic book. You're actually selling this to a much older audience. And for the most part, they could give zero fucks about being an ally. They could give zero fucks about seeing themselves in the character. They want value for their money. They want creators that respect the character and the lore and the history and all that kind of stuff, because they are the ones that are actually bought in on the universe. Actually know your audience and realize who is the most likely to go and buy this. And maybe next time, write a story for them. Perhaps we should write comic book stories for people that actually buy comic books. And maybe, just maybe, you won't find yourself in this predicament next time to where nobody wants to fucking support the thing and you have to go out there begging people and emotionally blackmailing them just to be interested and even know that it even exists. You can sit there and call people all the names that you want. It is not going to work. It is a tried and true method for people to tune the fuck out and decide that you are not worth their time and money. He's already started alienating all the people that should be interested in a book like this, the people that are actually supporting Sandman and Jay Garrick right now. And I imagine there's less of those than there are from the mainline continuity, but there should be, I imagine, at the third issue, even less support for Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, than the other two books because he's turned so many people off. In fact, I had this conversation, I alluded to it earlier with my good friend Eric Breen, a lifetime comic book reader, and he has just had enough. And this was absolutely an enormous part about it. Yes, we haven't read the book, but we have seen the preview pages and we know what you're selling, and it's garbage. There's also a link in the video description.